Hi everyone. I have something to read to you. This is a shout out to the 100,000 plus people who signed the petition submitted to the UK Parliament entitled "Do not sign any WHO pandemic treaty unless it's approved via public referendum." In the UK, we have a system whereby if 100,000 people sign a petition launched from the UK government's petitions website platform, the government are obliged to debate the subject in Parliament. This particular petition accrued the required number of signatures and more within a fortnight. And I'm making this short video to offer my humble gratitude to those who signed it and offer up to you the potential solace that despite the disappointing and somewhat patronizing response, there was, to my mind, something very important that came of it. We now know that there are an absolute minimum of 100,000 people in the country who are of one mind, and likely many, many more who, like me, have almost given up on signing petitions because while I generally agree with the various causes, although there are one or two that raise what remains of my eyebrows, having grown up in the 90s, I often don't sign them anymore because I don't think that the government has any intention of doing anything other than what it already intends to do. How's that for a sentence? That being said, I personally simply felt that I couldn't let this one pass by because I passionately don't want the WHO, funded in the main by Bill Gates, making decisions regarding what they reserve the right to define as a pandemic that could result in our country and in particular our children suffering from sanctions if we refuse to go along with whatever advice they give. And when I say advice in the new world of redefining anything that doesn't suit one's purpose, I mean internationally binding edicts of law. Especially since plenty of people will tell you that their money is on the Pandemic Preparedness Treaty's first bit of legally binding advice, being that we all get a vaccine passport, or AKA digital ID, ASAP, so that they can keep a record of the decline in our immune systems, which thankfully have already almost stopped working due to previous repairs and will shortly require a bi-weekly MOT to keep us ticking over. This great benevolence of a digital ID will also have the advantage of being linked to our social credit score, which, to our unending gratitude, given our heartfelt desire to become automatons of the global state, will give us the much needed opportunity to improve our attitude towards compliance, thereby allowing us to access our full potential allocation of digital currency, soon to be credits, so that we too can make purchases which minimize our carbon footprint and increase our consumption of bug protein, as was always intended to be the main sustenance of the human race. Anyway, so at almost 1 a.m. last night, all 100,000 plus of us received our reply from the UK government regarding the petition, which requested that they sign nothing Pandemic Preparedness Treaty related without a public referendum. Did I mention that it was almost 1 a.m.? I'm just checking because it was almost 1 a.m. when this official government response came through. I'm sure that they were hoping to catch all the other people who, like them, party hard into the night and do their admin half cut just past midnight. So what did they have to say? And now I'm going to read and annotate to my heart's content, because I know that we are all well practiced at discerning the difference between nonsense and good sense, given that we have spent the past 2 years applying ourselves to this essential skill. Dear Tamara, that's me, to protect lives, the economy, and future generations from future pandemics, the UK government supports a new legally binding instrument to strengthen pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. Now, it's always good to start with an abstract that summarizes your position, and this one is pretty erudite, Technically, there is no need to read any further because they state from the beginning that they, the UK government, already support this legally binding instrument. But let's read on just for the crack. COVID-19 has demonstrated that no one is safe until we are all safe, which is why we developed a legally binding cooperative agreement to deal with the flu. Oh no, we didn't, sorry, my mistake. Anyway, here we go again. COVID-19 has demonstrated that no one is safe until we are all safe, and that effective global cooperation is needed to better protect the UK and other countries around the world from the detrimental health, social and economic impacts of governments purposefully destroying the economy to manufacture a global banking collapse. Sorry, I read that bit wrong. It actually says that global cooperation is needed to better protect the UK and other countries around the world from the detrimental health, social and economic impacts of pandemics and other health threats. The UK supports a new internationally legally binding instrument as part of a cooperative and comprehensive approach to pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. Just in case you didn't get it from the initial abstract, here we have the reiteration that the UK supports a new internationally legally binding instrument, where the word instrument no longer refers to anything remotely musical or harmonious. Back to the text. At a World Health Assembly special session in late 2021, the 194 countries of the World Health Organization agreed to launch a process to draft and negotiate a new instrument through the auspices of the WHO to strengthen pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. How many times are we going to read those words? NLP out your not much yet. The negotiating process will be led by member states, including the UK. Note that we're not just participating or listening to the talks, we're going to be leading them, which, with no need to hearken to the ever increasingly obsolete, rusty art of reading between the lines, means that we are not going to vote against the motion. The instrument aims to improve how the world better prepares for and responds to future disease outbreaks of pandemic potential. So not even ones that have actually reached pandemic proportions at national, regional and global level. And that should actually be regional, national and global level, but that's just a copywriting edit, which probably slipped the editorial net, what with it being composed just after midnight. Anyway, the instrument, which seems to be our new handy euphemism for the imposition of global law upon the heretofore free species known as human beings, would complement the existing international instruments. Apparently there is a whole orchestra, which the UK has already agreed, such as the international health regulations. And I'll look into this after I've finished researching weaponized LED street lighting. Priorities abound, and promote greater collective action and accountability. The next bit is where they patronize you and fill up the word count by iterating information that goes without saying. A treaty is an international agreement concluded by states or with international organizations in written form and governed by international law. The UK is party to a large number of multilateral treaties, including many through the United Nations and its specialized agencies, such as the WHO. These instruments reflect obligations states have agreed to further common goals. Have agreed to enter into further common goals. We move on now to a paragraph which is embedded with important points of reference, wedged neatly between inane content in the hopes that you will scan over it and miss out on the absolutes. The current target date for agreeing the text, notice the language, not voting on the text, but agreeing the text, of the new instrument is at the World Health Assembly in May 2024. Over the next 2 years, the UK aims to work towards building a consensus on how the global community can better prevent, prepare for, and respond to future pandemics, and will actively shape and develop and negotiate the text. The new instrument would only be adopted by the World Health Assembly if the text achieves a 2/3 vote of the Health Assembly, Article 19 of the WHO Constitution. The Health Assembly is made up of representatives of WHO member states. So the UK is going to take a leading role in establishing the text of the new global law, on which only those who belong to the World Health Assembly will get a chance to vote for or against. I've tried to clarify whether the World Health Assembly comprises of a representative from each of the 194 member states that belong to the World Health Organization, but I'll have to get back to you on that because it is not immediately obvious. But assuming that all 194 countries get a vote, the motion will be carried if 129 of them agree. Once adopted, the instrument would only become binding on the UK if and when the UK accepts, ratifies it in accordance with its constitutional process. In the UK, this requires the treaty to be laid before Parliament for a period of 21 sitting days before the government can ratify it on behalf of the UK. I'm unclear on exactly what this means, to which end I have contacted a lawyer and I will update you accordingly. If something is laid before Parliament, do they necessarily have to debate it? Or can it just be said to have passed through the official channels without discussion? Bearing in mind that even if there were any discussion, it's clear that they're going to sign it anyway. Back to the text, the government always carefully considers whether domestic legislation will be required to implement the UK's international obligations when negotiating a treaty. Not every treaty requires implementing legislation, and it's too early to say if that would apply here. However, in all circumstances, the UK's ability to exercise its sovereignty would remain unchanged, and the UK would remain in control of any future domestic decisions about national restrictions or other measures. Now, this entire paragraph is a misnomer. Presumably the reference to domestic legislation is such that if the WHO decided that there were a pandemic and vaccinations, for instance, were to be mandated, then the UK law would have to change to reflect that requirement, which is why they don't know what legislation may be required. They say that they don't know whether any legislation will be required, but I suspect that that's just a slip of the keyboard, and what they meant to write was what rather than whether. Also, how does one retain one's sovereignty when one has agreed to enact international law, an agreement which would entail at the very least sanctions of a thus far unspecified nature being imposed on any member state that doesn't comply? Back to the text. If changes to UK law were considered necessary or appropriate to reflect obligations under the treaty, proposals for domestic legislation would go through the usual parliamentary process, and the UK would not ratify the treaty until domestic measures agreed by Parliament were in place. This process of ratification allows scrutiny by elected representatives of both the treaty and any appropriate domestic legislation in accordance with the UK's constitutional arrangements. And the last sentence, which we all now know is the first place that you should look for anything approximating the truth, assuming that you haven't died of boredom trying to get that far, reads thus: the government does not consider a referendum is necessary, appropriate, or in keeping with precedent for such an agreement. So, the UK government doesn't think that the British people should get any sort of meaningful say about whether they want to cede their bodily autonomy to a global conglomerate funded by elite philanthropists who have the same degree in medicine that I do. I don't have a degree in medicine, by the way. Well, guys, thank you again so much for listening. That was a long one, and It's very UK specific, so I imagine that the audience will be thus limited. However, I really do appreciate everybody listening. I love you. We can do this. We will do this. Hang on in there, all right? I love you. Thank you. Goodbye.